And we are live. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the stream. I hope you're doing well since the last time I saw you yesterday, hopefully. I'm very happy to have you back here for another interview, this time with a member of the European Parliament. Tonight we will discuss with MEP Ivan Stefanec from the EPP group, so on the right side of the EU politics. He's 60, he has been a Slovak MEP since 2014, so it's his second mandate in the Parliament. He's a member of the Committee on Internal Market and Consumer Protection and a substitute in the Committee on Industry, Research and Energy and the Subcommittee on Human Rights. And also, we're going to discuss that during the interview. He's also a member of the parliamentary delegation for the relation between the EU and Ukraine. So that's, let's say, pretty related to the current news. But before we start our conversation, as usual, I remind the house rules for anyone new with us tonight. So our guest will stay with us for about an hour. After that, he will go and enjoy the rest of his evening, and you will be stuck with me for another half an hour. And we'll do a debrief of the interview, discuss what you thought about it. I may share a few additional pieces of context if necessary, discuss with you, that sort of thing. As usual, I've prepared my own questions for Mr. Stefanec, and I also collected questions from you guys on Reddit, on Discord, and on other platforms. If you're watching this on Twitch or on YouTube, you can also ask your own questions live during the interview via the chat. It's there for that. I will keep an eye on it, and I will pick among your suggestions. And if you're watching this on Twitter, well, you just have to click the link, and that will bring you to Twitch, and you can do just that. In any case, feel free to react and participate via the chat, but as always, don't spam and stay civil. The goal of these interviews with MEPs are for you to better understand what they do, what is actually the job of an MEP. In this case, with Mr. Stefanec, what is his priorities, and maybe some of his opinion on EU political questions. We will try to not go too deep into policy discussion so that we don't lose you along the track. We will also not touch on national politics unless it's relevant to EU politics. So keep that in mind when you're asking your question. So without further ado, well, let's start. Good evening, Mr. Stefanec. Welcome on the channel. Welcome on the stream. Thank you very much for taking the time to answer these questions, our questions tonight. So you heard me do the introduction and briefly introduce you. Is there anything I forgot you would like to add to the introduction I made of you before we start?
No, it was a perfect introduction. Thank you for that, and thank you for invitation. I'm happy to answer any kind of question.
Well, perfect. Well, let's start. Let's start a bit by talking about you. How and why did you go into politics and later became an MEP? What was the spark for you to say, I'm going to go in politics?
Well, I spent 20 years in business, also international company. I was general manager for international company in my country, in Slovakia. Then I worked abroad, and I started to be interested in public affairs more and more. So I was involved more in business organization, and it was another step to deal more with public affairs. And I was in touch with also different kind of politicians. Some of them were my friends. So I became slowly more and more involved in politics. And during accession process of my country, Slovakia, to the European Union, basically I decided to help government to help them, and I was the part of accession process. I managed the implementation of euro currency in my country, and then I stepped into national parliament and later on in the European Parliament. So basically I still deal with business issue. I try to help particularly small entrepreneurs who are, in my view, the most important employers in Europe, and I try to help them to create jobs and basically to do the same job just from the perspective of politics.
Mm-hmm. And so you just mentioned it. You have a big focus on SMEs, and SMEs are also important for the EPP, your political group. You are also in the INCO committee, which also deals with the SME. So. And I didn't mention that, but you're also president of the SME Europe Association, so another group of MEPs that care a lot about SMEs. So what can an MEP do actually for SMEs, and why should the EU give a special treatment to these small companies?
I think it's a principal question because really SMEs are major employers. They create 2/3 of jobs in the European Union. I mean, very often we forget about the importance of SMEs. Basically, my job is to create better environment for them to realize, to implement their ideas, and to have better access to financial sources. Because very often SMEs, they complain they have good ideas, but they have still very bureaucratic environment. So we try to go down with administrative cost to simplify all the processes and to basically improve environment where they can acquire financial resources. I think in Europe it's a challenge because, for example, in comparison with US is capital market economy, and Europe is more banking economy. So we try to create more market economy rules and also capital market economy. So we would like to build real capital market union in EU in order to improve access to capital for SMEs. So simplify processes, improve access to capital, and basically to help them grow.
Actually, you mentioned the common capital market. I had a question from actually a Slovak person on this. Was asking what can you expect in the future, in the near future, about the EU capital market? Are there any efforts underway to create a more European capital market or not?
Yes, definitely it is. You know, we have single market and we still don't utilize fully this potential to have single market. So I think we have to remove all the barriers on our market and to have real capital market. So for SMEs, it wouldn't be different if they acquire capital in France or in Germany. So they would have really opportunity to get finance everywhere in the European Union. So I think it's very important that also we have to improve the opportunities for venture capital funds, for new funds, and also for private public partnership for the projects financed from European perspective, for example, by European Investment Bank. So we have a lot of ideas, but we have to implement them just in order to improve the access to capital for SMEs, because they very often address this issue to us that still they leave European Union because they don't have enough financing, they don't have even enough sources to implement their ideas. So for many of them, it's a crucial point.
And so you just mentioned that there are barriers for on the EU capital market. Why do these barriers exist currently? Is there any particular reason, or is it just because the EU so far didn't decide to unify them?
Also, it's a very good question, because these barriers exist because still we have not completed single market yet. In terms of goods, capital, in terms of freedom of movement of labor force, yes, it works, but not really in terms of services. We have not completed single market in services, so we have to complete it also from legislative perspective. Then another point is that we have to build digital single market. Now we are in middle of digital revolution, and I think we have to really create legislative environment for digital single market. And the question why barriers exist, the answer is because there is still a lot of national interests from many national member states. They prefer national interests rather they think from European perspective. I think that's the key. We have to think from European perspective. We have to understand that common European solution is more useful, and it's better for everybody. Not everybody can understand that, and even not every politician from national perspective can understand that. Mm-hmm. The role for European Parliament is also to force this idea of common Europe, and also to force, I do believe, useful European integration forward, because still there is a lot of good projects, like we have mentioned, Capital Market Union, but also the issue of energy union, the issue of health union. Now during pandemic, we knew how it is important and how it is more useful for everybody if you, for example, if we have common purchase of vaccines and different equipment, health equipment. It's much better than every state would do that. Now in time of crisis of Russian invasion to Ukraine, we are aware of the fact that we have to improve our defense. So defense union is on the table, energy union, because, for example, it would be much better if we have common purchase of gas and other energy sources rather than some national interest. So we have to understand that together we are stronger.
And so you mostly focused on SMEs. You consider that they are the most important, but at the same time, at EU level, at least at political level, there's a lot of talk about creating what they are the so-called EU champions. So big EU companies that would be able to compete with, for instance, US companies, Chinese companies in the rest of the world. So do you see this push for EU champions as a threat for SMEs? Since here we're talking about giving an advantage to the biggest actors, support them instead of SMEs.
I see it as the advantage also, because if we have some good examples, good champions, those are examples which can be followed by others. Every kind of business needs some examples, some champions. So also we organize many competitions, and also we organize like contents for SME awards for champions in field of innovation, energy, and for example, transport, etc. So I think it's very good if citizens and also SMEs, they can see the best practices which can be followed. So I do believe that to have some positive examples, it is also positive inspiration for everybody.
And you mentioned already the fact that SMEs have difficulties to raise capital. Do you see other reasons why we don't have big EU EU champions already? Why don't SMEs turn into these champions?
Yeah, I think there are many issues which are addressed by SMEs. Basically, during pandemic, we asked them, we organized a survey, what are the major difficulties before pandemic and also recently. But the result was very clear. The first priority, they told us that they have difficulty to get finances. The access to finance is the number one priority, not only from banks, but particularly from capital markets. Therefore, we are talking about capital market union. Secondly, still they deal with bureaucracy. So we have to simplify the processes on national and also on European level. So still there is a lot of administrative cost, which is harmful, which is a barrier for SMEs. And thirdly, the issue of skills. Still, if they have even good ideas, SMEs, they have quite challenge to get the right people from the market, and they don't have enough skills, particularly digital skills. This is the question or this is the challenge of today, because digital market is developing so fast that there is not enough qualified people. They don't have enough digital skills, so there is the lack of qualified labor force in this field. So I think it's necessary to address this challenge not only for education system but also for requalification programs which are funded from European sources as well.
You just mentioned digitization, Digital Europe. That's something that you work on in the Parliament, and I think that there's a plan, 2030 digitization plan, if I'm not wrong, that you work on. So what should the EU do, in your opinion, to become more digital? And on the other side, are there areas where, on the contrary, the EU should be careful when it comes to digital?
We are in the center of digital revolution right now, because, for example, digital market doubled in last 10 years, and I'm sure for next 10 years it will be the same picture. It will double. So therefore, everybody is dealing with digital technologies, and during pandemic also we recognize how digital world is important, how digital skills are important, how we have to improve processes. So digitization is changing everything. So from my point of view, we have to focus on three things. First of all, we have to improve digital infrastructure. So it means that we have to get cheaper and better internet access. Secondly, we have to have the right legislative framework in place. In the European Parliament, we are working on digital legislation like Digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act, which have been approved already, those legislative files, but also a new one is coming, which is very important, and this is Artificial Intelligence Act. So those are three legislative files which will shape our future in the next decade. And second, the third challenge is, as I mentioned already, this is the skills, digital skills. So infrastructure, legislative framework, and digital skills. Those are the three most important challenges which we have to address in order to improve basically the whole environment, and in order to achieve our objectives which are set up in digital decade or in digital compass by 2030.
And you just mentioned the AI regulation that is supposed to come soon. AI is kind of a buzzword. Everyone talks about AI these days, but also it's a technology that also creates a lot of concern. Like, people are also wary about the risks that AI could create. So what kind of risk are we talking about? Is it like do we risk having Skynet arriving in the EU, or what kind of practical problem or challenges that we have to tackle when it comes to AI?
You are absolutely right that people are very much concerned. Basically, based on the surveys, people in Europe are much more concerned for AI implementation rather than people in US or even in China. So we have to address this, and we have to not only improve digital skills, but we have to work on these AI concerns. So people are concerned that these technologies will not be helpful and would work against them. And I think we have to just come with many examples, and we have to have also right legislation in place which will guarantee that using artificial intelligence, it would be not harmful, but it would be for good of citizens. It would be beneficial for citizens. So I think it's very important also to establish the principle that artificial intelligence is the tool which can be used, but at the end of this process, human being will be decision maker. So human being would be all the time at the end of this process the person who will decide how or whether to use artificial intelligence. And also for citizens, it must be very clear whether they deal with artificial intelligence machinery or not. So in order to work on this concern, whether AI is useful or not, I think they have to understand that, nowadays we read, for example, articles in newspapers which are prepared by artificial intelligence. So we are not even aware of that. Now we are dealing with digital technologies, including AI tools, for example, in our search machines, etc., etc. So daily we are in touch with AI facts and AI tools, but we are not aware of that. I think we have to improve our awareness. Where is AI already implemented and where is not? At the end, if it is done in the right way, AI tools can save a lot of lives. For example, artificial intelligence and their implementation tools in healthcare can save a lot of lives. Also, artificial intelligence in transport can improve services in transport and safety as well. So basically, in every field of our business, in every corner of our business, can be used AI as the right tool for safety and for the improvement of quality of our services. And also, for example, I'm working right now on the so-called machinery directive. This is important file, which means that artificial intelligence parts will be also included, and there must be clear in which way, and they will not increase risk, but rather opposite. They will improve safety of machines.
Okay, and still on AI, you mentioned the potential of that AI could represent in health, in transport, in number of fields, but still on the common concerns that we hear about AI, and there's a debate about it in Parliament. It's about the use of AI in security matters, in judicial matters, because they are afraid that AI could is biased, that it could increase inequalities, or it could lead to, let's say, a Chinese way of using AI and surveillance technology. So do you think that besides the potential that AI can represent in certain sector, at EU level we should say, okay, there can be no AI, or we can't have very autonomous AI in this domain because there's too much risks?
Well, I think very important is to understand where is AI implemented and how it is implemented. Of course, it can create risk, but once again, at the end, it must be the tool which will improve the security, safety, which will improve quality of services. And also what is very important, that we have to take care about human rights. If you mention a comparison with China, AI is very often used not on behalf of people, but against people, because people are controlled by state. They create a system of surveillance, basically, which works for the state against people. This is not the case in the European Union. We have democracy, and also it means that there are elementary human rights guaranteed in our constitutions, but guaranteed in our treaty. So therefore, also we have to adjust all AI implementation to our current human rights, and also we have to protect our human rights. So basically, people they have the right to decide whether to use or not to use the AI implementation tools.
Okay, and one final question on the issue of digitization. Another buzzword that we hear all around is the cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, and that sort of thing. And I had a question from someone who was asking, what do you think of these digital asset investments, so cryptocurrencies, and the overall ability for the EU to compete in this field in the future?
Well, this is also innovation which brings, which is brought today by digitization, which is brought today by innovation. It is new idea, and it will be here also for future. But honestly, I do not believe that it will compete with, let's say, official currency. There will be always official currency, which we have in the European Union, in Eurozone, as euro as the second strongest currency. And I do believe that still euro is the currency which also will spread not only in more European countries. There are more countries on the way to Eurozone, which is a positive message, but also is our role to strengthen the role of euro as the currency around the world. So I do believe that there is the room also for development of cryptocurrency, but I do not think that cryptocurrency will replace official currency, which is euro.
Mm-hmm. To move on to a different topic, another thing that you work on is international public procurement. So the ability for companies to bid and obtain public contracts outside the EU, and also for companies outside the EU to get public contracts in the EU itself. So what is your analysis of public procurement globally, like in the EU and outside the EU?
Well, European companies, particularly SMEs, were in a worse position regarding public procurement outside the EU. So we were in the European Union open for the third world, SMEs, but many countries outside EU, they didn't open their markets, their public procurements for SMEs. So international procurement instrument, which we worked so many years, and finally last month we came to the agreement about this instrument. It means that our SMEs will have access to the third country markets. So we can say that we have improved the position for our SMEs because they will have access to this third world. We are talking about this agreement which is targeting like 70% of global procurement market. So it's a huge market and a huge positive impact to the chances and to the development of our small and medium entrepreneurs. So not only in IT services, but also, for example, in transport delivery services, and they have a really much better chances to realize their businesses, even outside EU.
So that means that in the future, whenever the EU is having a trade deal or an investment deal with a third country, another country of the world, then of course the foreign companies could have access to the public procurement in the EU, but as well the EU company could have access to the same level to the public procurement in those countries, right?
Right, like exactly. So we have now equal position for our SMEs and third country SMEs because it was not equal so far.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to public procurement, for quite some years there's been calls to create a Buy European Act. So the idea that European countries should buy first from European company for their public contract, and maybe even in general. And it's a bit of a EU equivalent of the famous Buy American Act, where the American states are supposed to buy from American company. So do you support the idea of a Buy European Act?
Not really. I think what I support free trade and I support free market, which is I absolutely sure about that, which is beneficial for consumer and for European citizens. So if there is something cheaper and better quality, so I would prefer a free market economy. I would prefer really the reality of free market rather than some protectionism and rather than discrimination of European before non-European companies. So I do believe that free market economy works and it is the best tool for our citizens.
And since you're saying, okay, I support the free market economy, and so the best company should win the contract, but whether when it is within the EU but also outside the EU, sometimes there is the accusation that there is so-called dumping, that some other companies are getting undue advantage, and so that European company, or sometimes actually you know quite well, I imagine, the fact that on the Western Europe countries say that Eastern Europe country are having undue advantages compared to them, etc., etc. So do you think that it's normal and that's how it works, or there should be remedies against these kind of practices outside the EU and within the EU? I mean,
yeah, exactly. It is a different situation inside and outside EU. Talking about situation inside EU, we have the same obligations and we have the same rights. So therefore, we have to have the same conditions inside EU. We have the common market. European common market is the strongest market in the world, and we have to apply the same principles. So, for example, also talking about public procurement, there should be the same chances for companies from every national states of every member state of European Union. So definitely there should be the same chances. Yes, in some countries they have, let's say, cheaper labor and they probably the same better advantage, but this is the market. If they can provide better price at the end, they have the chance, but also quality must be satisfactory. So this is very often not only question of price, but at the end quality of final product or final services. So this is point regarding inside EU competition. If we talk about outside EU competition and potential dumping offerings or potential dumping prices, it's a different issue. We have the rules. We have to be compliant with WTO, World Trade Organization, and if there are some, let's say, threats of dumping prices, which happens from time to time, we can protect our market, because what is dumping? Dumping, it is just to provide price which is cheaper than production cost, and this is not fair pricing. So therefore, it's very dangerous. For example, we have many experiences with dumping, for example, from China. Recently, we dealt with the issue of dumped Chinese steel, for example, and we asked WTO to review this. And also, at the end, we have in the European Union tools how to protect our market, how to apply customs and duties on those products which are dumped, which are under production cost, because this is not healthy and this is not sustainable. So we have to apply international rules, and fortunately we have these rules in the place.
I have a question in the chat asking, would you apply the same open market principle for more strategic sectors? He's mentioning IT, 5G networks, or even military technology. So is it the same, or should certain sector be treated differently?
That's a good question. The answer is, in principle, yes, but yes, I'm a believer in free market economy because it works for the consumer, for our citizens. But for example, for some sensitive digital technologies, I would be careful. For example, if we talk about digital infrastructure, we recognize many technologies which might be dangerous and which might work against European citizens. For example, Chinese digital technologies, 5G technologies, which we are very careful with that, because there is a potential threat that they can they can get sensitive information outside EU. So we have to have some protection talking about these sensitive technologies. But for the services where is the free competition, and if there is any danger, I would say yes in any kind of business.
Okay. Moving on a little bit to the work you do in the delegation EU-Ukraine, like I mentioned in the introduction. How has your work within this parliamentary delegation evolved since the beginning of the war in Ukraine?
Well, that's the principal question. We are dealing with this issue basically on daily basis in the European Parliament. Unfortunately, because of brutal Russian invasion to Ukraine. So first of all, we try to do everything what we can in order to support our Ukrainian friends. So we provide them political, economical, and humanitarian help. Political help, so it means that we do all what we can in order to set up the status of candidate country for European Union for Ukraine. Ukraine is already a so-called associated country since 2014, and until now they already implemented more than 50% of European legislation. So it means that country is on the right way, but to have this status of candidate country, it is not only a moral status, it is not only moral signal for Ukrainians that they are on the right way, but also it would mean in future more financial sources. Another political support, for example, was that I proposed to nominate President Zelensky for Sakharov Prize for freedom of thought. The Sakharov Prize, this is the highest reward which we give every year in the European Parliament to different personalities around the world. For example, last year we awarded Alexei Navalny, who is now in prison in Russia. Now this year I propose to give this prize to President Zelensky because he is really the leader in terms of protection of thought and in terms of protection of lives now, not only in Ukraine, but in Europe and in the whole world. So it is a political support. Secondly, economical support. We dedicate more and more resources to Ukraine. For example, our help for so-called macro financial stabilization is in the amount of 1.2 billion euro. And this money is for social help for retired people. So just to help Ukraine to run their state in times of war. So this is a very important help for them because they have major refugee crisis, particularly inside Ukraine. More than 10 million people moved from eastern to western Ukraine. So they have a lot of issues with that. Thirdly, humanitarian help. Basically, we dedicated also many resources to the humanitarian help to refugees who are inside Ukraine, but also who left the country. More than 3 million people fled the country to Poland, Slovakia, Romania, Moldova, and other countries. So we try to help those people who fled from Ukraine, and also we try to improve situation in countries which are mostly affected by this refugee crisis. For example, we changed also the basic rule that European sources must be co-financed. Now 100% of European sources without any co-financing from member states can be dedicated for refugees, for their accommodation, for their education, etc. And last but not least, what is important, we changed the rule that not used European funds can be used for refugees and for the states which help basically them. So this is in a nutshell the help what we are doing for Ukraine now.
So you already mentioned that Ukraine officially candidated to join the EU. It has done the headline lately, and in addition to the official candidacy, President Zelensky asked for a special procedure, an accelerated procedure for Ukraine to be able to join pretty much tomorrow the EU. So what do you think about the idea of an accelerated procedure for Ukraine, given that, as you know, we already have other countries that have the candidate status to join the EU for sometimes decades. So how would you treat Ukraine in this context?
Yes, I think accelerated procedure is already that we have asked for the statute of candidate country. So this is already accelerated procedures, but I have to say that everybody understands that in order to be member state, they have to fulfill all the criteria. I've mentioned already that more than 50% of acquis communautaire, more than 50% of European legislation has been implemented in Ukraine, which is the positive status, which is a good thing. But they have to continue. I know it's very, very difficult during war, but you know the rules must be applied in the same way for everybody. So we have to help them. We can accelerate the process, but at the end, in order to be full member of European Union, they have to fulfill all criteria like every other country. And I understand that also other countries are quite let's say nervous, and if they see that we have set up, let's say, this open door for Ukraine, countries like Moldova or Georgia, they are saying, okay, we are here as well. We are the part of Eastern Partnership, and we have also the status of associated country, would like to be candidate country, etc. So I assume that there might be similar process that not only Ukraine, but in future maybe 3 countries together would join EU, so Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. But it depends on their development. The ball is on their side. They have to fulfill criteria, and of course, at the end, it is the decision of each single member state of European Union. The rules must be applied in the same way.
Yeah, so if I understand well, it's one thing to accelerate a bit the procedure, but that doesn't mean that anyone gets a pass and that the rules to join the EU don't apply to them. But you also mentioned in the end it depends of member state, and as you know, some member states are not certain whether they want to support new countries join the EU. There is a so-called enlargement fatigue over the few years. So, how do you think you can convince these countries to say, okay, we need to do enlargement, we need to let those countries join, including Ukraine?
Yes, you're right. There is a different view from different countries. Particularly, we saw it towards Western Balkan countries, towards Montenegro, towards Northern Macedonia, Albania. So there is different view from different member states. How to convince them? I think they must be convinced that it is win-win situation for everybody. And to enlarge European Union, it is not only pure political decision, it is just the economical decision and also decision of security right now, as we can see, taking into consideration this crazy Russian war in Ukraine. This is also the issue of security. So everybody understands that Ukraine is democracy, Russia is not. Ukraine is democracy, and if we would like to enlarge this space for peace, prosperity, and democracy and stability, what is the European Union? Because the idea of European Union to have peace among member states, so this idea works very well. So also European Union was established after Second World War, basically based on the agreement between Germany and France. Fortunately, it works, and it enlarged, and now it shows that this peace idea, this idea of common understanding, works very well. Therefore, this is the best way how to convince, how to persuade all the member states that you would like to have peace in Europe. Enlargement would work.
So we talked about the help provided to Ukraine, but on the same time, the other side of the coin is that the EU has been putting sanctions on Russia. Yesterday, the Slovakian Prime Minister, Edward Heger, said in an interview that Europe should crush Putin economically. Do you agree with this statement that Europe should crush Putin economically?
I do agree absolutely with this statement. On one hand, as we are talking about, we have to do everything in order to help Ukrainians. On the other hand, we have to do everything in order to stop aggressor, stop Russia. And how we can do it? Because we in the European Union, we are not fighting. We don't want to have fight with Russia. We don't want to have the Third World War. We have only economical tools. Therefore, these sanctions as economical tools, they work very well. And we have to apply all possible sanctions to Russia. I do absolutely agree with this position. What we have done already towards Russia, we have frozen assets. We have agreement about, let's say, stop of this golden passport for Russian oligarchs. They cannot continue anymore with this practice that they have some money and they will legalize then in the European Union. We have also stopped SWIFT as financial system for financial transactions for 7 Russian banks, and still there is potential to do more. I have to say, not all banks are in this sanction mechanism. We have applied personal sanctions towards President Putin and more than 1,000 Russian officials, which is unprecedented. We have applied sanctions towards Russian, for example, airplanes, Air Force. We closed the sky in the European Union for Russian airlines. So we have done a lot, but still, I think what we have not done and what should be done is to apply sanctions for Russian energy sources, because Russia has a lot of income from oil, even from coal and gas, sending to Europe. And I think many politicians are afraid of doing so because it would be painful. Yes, it would be painful, but I think in order to stop the war, in order to harm aggressor, we should think about it. And in my view, it is necessary, and we have to do everything in order to diversify our sources.
I have one last question on Ukraine coming from the chat. So you mentioned that you wanted to nominate President Zelensky for the Zakharov Prize, and so I have someone in the chat say, well, but is President Zelensky could he still be eligible to the Zakharov Prize, given that he took recently some decision? He dissolved a number of political parties because he said that they had links with Russia. He mandated the unification of all TV channels, so that means that there is probably not anymore privately owned TV channels. So do you think that this is compatible with the idea of freedom of conscience, defense of liberty, and all that? And so the Zakharov Prize.
Well, yes. The answer is yes. I think he's eligible to do that, despite these actions. What do you think? What you mentioned? Because he's in very difficult situation. He's in war. No one from European leaders have been in such difficult situation. And from my point of view, he deals with the situation very well, and he really protects not only his country, but he protects Europe. We have to understand that if Ukraine would lose this war, there is the threat that there are more countries which can be invaded by Russian forces. That's the reality based on crazy Russian ideology. So President Zelensky is protecting not only Ukraine, but also democratic Europe. Mm-hmm. And I think in terms of, sorry, just to conclude that, yeah, in terms of his action, I think he basically what he's doing right now, there is the evidence of his leadership, which definitely he protects lives and freedom in his country. So I think he fulfills the conditions for nomination.
Mm-hmm. So Slovakia, your country, is a part of the informal group called the Visegrad 4, which is an informal group with Hungary, Poland, and the Czech Republic to work together and try to push a common interest in the at EU level. There was a meeting that was supposed to take place this week, I think today and tomorrow, or in the next couple of days, and it was cancelled actually because Poland and the Czech Republic were protesting against the what they see as the controversial position of Hungary towards Russia and towards Ukraine. So, do you think that indeed the ambiguity of Viktor Orban is problematic is really problematic or not? I mean, we can remember that last week President Zelensky slammed into Viktor Orban during his speech at the UCO. So, what's your stance on that?
Yes, you're right. Viktor Orban is a problematic person. He did many problematic things, including decisions favored more Russia than Ukraine. For example, he forbid the help for weapons for Ukraine. Everybody supported by weapons to protect lives in Ukraine. Viktor Orban has not done so. Everybody knows that he is closer to Mr. Putin than anybody else in the European Union. So on one side, he didn't protest against sanctions, I have to say, and I have to emphasize that fact that he didn't raise his voice against sanctions against Russia. But still, he has a lot of very doubtful signals towards Russia. So yes, we have a V4 cooperation in practice, but still we don't have full unity in all kind of questions. For example, Mr. Orban is doing his individual decisions, his individual policy, and I think also it is connected with coming elections in Hungary. So he's doing many decisions because of coming elections.
Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about more general questions that I receive from people. So because of the war of Ukraine, but also other events, we know that there is an increase in gas price, in food prices. We have the war in Ukraine, so there is a fear among people that this situation could lead, as it has been the case in the past, to an increase in the place of the far right in Europe. So, how do you think the EU and the EPP or your political group should handle this possible rise of the far right because of the circumstances?
Well, it's a very, very good question as well. The honest answer is nobody knows what will be development, because nobody knows until when this crazy war in Ukraine will continue. Nobody knows when it will stop. So everything depends also on the timing and on the end of this crazy Russian war in Ukraine. But what we know some principles. We know that there is quite good level of unity among European leaders. Well, maybe with exception of Mr. Orban, who was mentioned already. But my feeling in the European Parliament is that basically Putin united Europe. Putin united European Parliament and united most European leaders, because they are aware of this fact that there is the threat of enlargement of this war, of enlargement of this situation. So there is the really very high demand to increase defense spending and to cooperate much more in Europe in area of defense, in area of energy, and we have to simply deepen European integration in these fields. So unity and continuity for European integration, I think there's a common understanding about that. If there is the rise of far right in future, honestly, nobody knows, but I would say rather no, because a couple of years ago, there was the increase of far right in Europe, and it was quite a dangerous situation, but these tendencies have not been reflected, for example, in the elections for European Parliament in 2019. Far rights, they have not achieved results which were expected. And now, if I have a look to the separate countries, they are not really on the rise. Whether they are on the rise, also, I think simply it would depend on the continuity of this unity, which I recognize nowadays. If European leaders are responsible, and if they are united not only against Russia, but if they are united about what they should do in future for Europe, for example, to work for citizens, to guarantee them energy supplies, energy security, to improve security for citizens, to improve capital, access to capital, as we talked before, etc., etc. So simply, if citizens they feel much secure and the living standard would not go down. So I would rather say that there is no chance for the rise of far right.
Mm-hmm. I have more of a comment from the chat right now, but I will turn it into a question. The person is saying that given the context, it looks like we really need an EU army with strong nuclear capabilities. So do you think that because of the war in Ukraine and elsewhere, it's the time has come for EU army, or do you think it's a bit premature to talk about an EU army, especially with nuclear capabilities?
Well, the reality is that we are in a European Union economical superpower, but in terms of defense, we are dwarf. We are too weak. We rely on NATO, we rely, as the matter of fact, on US still. And I think we have to change it. We have to take much more responsibility about our defense. We have to improve our defense. Everybody understands that. And if we are talking about that, we are talking also about defense, let's say, about army, not only about, let's say, Frontex, but we talk about army as well. At the same time, I'm saying it would not make sense to build something what would be like dual army versus NATO. So it must be under NATO umbrella. It must be compliant with our NATO security guarantees. So yes, it's time to build army in the European Union. Basically, first decision have been made for basically first 5,000 forces for immediate actions. And also, I have to say there have been decision made before for 10,000 Frontex stuff. So this is not new, but we have to continue. But in order to not waste money, it must be compliant with our NATO activities in order to just to improve our guarantees. To talk about nuclear forces, I would be careful about that. I think there is no need really to build nuclear forces. I think it's rather necessary to be like fast in reaction, and NATO have some rooms for improvement. I think we have to fulfill these holes and to improve our security.
Mm-hmm. I have another question from the chat, but this time not related to any of this. The question is, should less developed regions in the EU be given additional funds to build up and create a renewable source of energy, especially in the context of getting rid of the Russian gas, the EU Green Deal and all that? Or should these transition be funded by the regional development fund that already exists? And so the person is using the example of Poland that still heavily relies on coal, but they don't have enough funds to do the transition towards other source of energies. So should there be specific EU money for that?
The answer is yes. Yes, it should be specific money for that, and there are specific money, specific funds for example, for Poland to go away from the coal. For example, also taking into consideration the example from Slovakia, we decided in 2 years to go away from coal. We received also some European support for that, and every European country is eligible to get some European funding if they decide to do so. Now, I think it's a relevant question if we talk about minimization of our dependence from Russian sources, whether to go ahead with Green Deal or not, or how. My answer is yes, we have to go for Green Deal. We can be even more ambitious, because to have more renewables, it would mean to have less dependence on fossil fuels. So there is a chance to have even more renewables. Even my party, EPP party in the European Parliament, we proposed to not have only 40%, but even 45% of renewables in our European energy mix by 2030. So to be even more ambitious and to have less fossil fuels and to be more ambitious in terms of renewables. I think this would be the question also for next couple of years. But there is also one point which is quite often forgotten by politicians, and this is energy efficiency. We have to implement energy efficiency projects. We have to save money. We have to be more efficient in terms of energy, and then we can have more savings. We can be more efficient also and more competitive.
Okay, I'm looking at the time, so we're gonna go into the final two questions. So first, if you could change anything, you have a magic wand, you can make a wish and change anything you want about the EU and EU politics in general. What would you change and why?
Well, I would change decision-making process in order to be faster. Sometimes we are talking too much and too long discussions before making final decisions. I do understand that it makes sense, because everybody has the right to express respective view, respective idea. So at the end, during this decision-making process, there is common consensus, there is common understanding. But in my view, I would limit time for discussions and to be more active, let's say, to have faster action. And for example, in foreign policy and in defense policy, to have not veto right, but to have a majority for decision making. I think it would be faster, and it would help also to improve our let's say reaction in terms of global answers which are necessary nowadays.
Mm-hmm. And final question, so where do you stand on the overall debate about a federal European Union? Are you in favor of it? Are you against it? Are you on the fence?
Well, European Union is the union of free member states. I would keep the substance to have subsidiarity principle and to have the union of member states. But at the same time, I'm saying that we have to continue with our European integration. A couple of years ago, we could not imagine that we will cooperate, for example, in euro with euro currency. Before pandemic, we could not imagine that we will cooperate with common purchase of vaccines and in healthcare. So we now it is the case. Before Russian invasion to Ukraine, we were pretty slow with defense. Now we are talking about defense union, etc., etc. So there are many useful projects. So I'm a believer that European integration is sustainable if this is based on voluntary principle of subsidiarity principle and on free decision of member states. It will be stronger if people are persuaded that really together we are stronger and it will work.
All right, and as a bit of a final word, if you want people to remember one thing of your intervention tonight, what should they remember about you? The one message, yeah, the one message you want to give people.
It's the toughest question at the end. Well, well, let's be open. I would say about me. Don't forget to be supportive for people who create jobs. So let's support SMEs. Let's be aware of the fact that small companies who are not so visible, that they are the most important for job creation in the European Union. It would be a major message.
Well, the message is heard. Thank you very much, Ivan Stefanec, for your time tonight. Chat, make sure to thank him for his time. You can follow him on Twitter. You have the link below the video feed. Mr. Stefanec, thanks again. I wish you a good evening. I hope that maybe in the future you'll come back on the channel on other occasion. And well, good evening. Have a good one.
Thank you very much indeed. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, chat. Let's start the debriefing. Tell me everything, what you thought. I imagine that's thank you in Slovak. My Slovak is a bit rusty. My apologies, Fed Panda. I think it's Dakujem. I think that's... I'm pronouncing that with a French accent, so that's terrible, but well, I will look it up later on how to pronounce it properly. So, tell me everything. So, in the meantime, I took notes as usual, you know me, and we're gonna cover the different topics. So, we talked a lot about SMEs. SMEs, you have to know that they are a bit of a totem in EU politics. Whenever you have EU policy, whenever you have EU law, you will have someone say SMEs. You will have a line about protecting SMEs, maintaining, giving a level playing field to SMEs. And then when you talk about the EPP, so the party, the right, the center right of EU politics, from which Mr. Stefanec comes from, it's even more totemic. SMEs are everywhere, and you can expect it to be a big argument. So somehow SMEs are a big focus at EU level on the particular side. Economic policy seems fine. Bit too liberal again for your liking, though. Well, he gets half of the mark, so that's progress. I mean, bearing in mind that usually we have Greens and Renew, I would say that for you and Rose, it was already progress. Stop me if I'm wrong. Was a bit late, but because of a project work, don't worry. Yeah, it was really interesting. It was you can still catch up the VOD afterwards, but indeed, yeah. I think you were better with him than our usual guest. I'm sure. What else did we talk about? We talked a lot about digital policy. So he mentioned that there's a lot of initiative going on. He mentioned the DSA, the DMA. So we already had a debate. Well, no, the debate was with the French-speaking part of the audience. So DSA, DMA, it's the two big current legal legislation in the work that they are in the final steps before being finalized. Is basically the rules applicable to the internet and to the big tech companies when it comes to competition. So it's kind of one of the big initiatives that are taken from during this mandate. He mentioned as well that the AI Act, so the EU regulation of artificial intelligence will come soon. If I'm not mistaken, the EU would be the first country, the first region in the world to adopt regulation on that. Again, it's because the EU always likes to be on the forefront of digital policies. They are let's say they are a bit of a model. Like many countries tend to look at what the EU is doing in terms of digital policy and digital law, and then copy what they do, like whether it's on data protection, copyright. Now it's going to be the DSA-DMA, and the EU hopes for about AI. And so we talked about the risks that can be associated with that, and the overarching idea of the EU approach to artificial intelligence is to basically create a third way, what they call a third way, a European way of dealing with AI. And the idea there is to say, well, on the one hand, you have an American approach to AI, which is completely market-based, that companies do whatever they want. The competition is king, and there is limited rules. On the other side of the spectrum, you have the Chinese model, which is, like the MEP mentioned during the interview, the idea that AI is used to support the state is used in an authoritarian way to suppress citizens, and then the EU wants to create a third way, a European way, where AI would be, as they call, human-centric, where AI would still be on the free market and all that, but it will have to respect human rights and freedom of citizen. And so, for instance, there will be limitations as to what AI can or cannot do. Basically, the AI would be banned from certain kind of sensitive decision making, that sort of thing. So that's the so-called EU model on artificial intelligence that will be discussed in the coming month and years. We discussed about public procurement, so the idea that currently where the EU is actually a very open market already, in the sense that public procurement, so the public contracts that states, your local city or whatever they're doing to fill a contract, anyone can apply to them, including companies that are not European, that are not from your respective country. On the other side, in many cases, third countries, so let's say, let's not take a country with a deal with the EU. Let's say the US. They are very controlled, especially the US. They are very controlled public procurement, meaning that it's very difficult for an EU company to actually apply and win this kind of contract, because the country are protecting their own market. They want to give priority to their own companies, and so that's always the case, including after trade deals are concluded between the EU and third countries. So, for instance, you take Canada. There is a trade deal between the EU and Canada, but still, even if it increases a bit as part of the trade deals, the access of EU companies to the public procurement, to the public contract, still, this is less than what foreign companies could have access to when it comes to the EU. So he was mentioning that now there is rules that would ensure reciprocity, meaning that I give you access to my market, you give me access to your market. That's pretty much the idea of that. He was opposed to the Bio-European Act because he assimilates that to protectionism. That's indeed like one of the arguments against it. Even if I was a bit surprised. Then it makes sense in his economic perspective, but that's more an argument that you hear from the Nordics, who are, say, pure liberals economically. So they see this as a form of protectionism. But it is a debate in a number of MEPs, especially from Southern Europe, have been pushing for that for quite some time, taking as a model the Buy American Act. So the American legislation that says that a percentage of public procurement must go to US companies. However, he nuanced that as well, where I don't recall who asked the question. I don't know if it's you, Andres, or I don't. Oh yeah, it was you, Andres, who asked the question about the strategic sectors. And so he said, yeah, in some sector when there is a strategic risk for the EU, where there is a suspicion that some companies would use technology against us, then indeed we could put limitations. So he used indeed the example of China in 5G. So you may remember during the Trump years, the ban that Trump tried to implement it in the US and try to force on the EU to try to prevent Huawei, so the Chinese telecom company, from obtaining any kind of 5G contracts in the US and beyond, because of concerns that, well, Huawei is under the control, indirect control of China, and so they could use the 5G, the technology of Huawei in 5G to try to snoop in and spy on the US, on Europe, and on the West in general. So he's saying that in these specific, some limited cases, indeed, it was possible to limit the free market, but as a rule, no, it should be the cheapest and the best that should win. We talked a lot about Ukraine, so I'm going to go quickly through that because we discussed about Ukraine quite a lot over the past few weeks, so I don't want to repeat myself, but it was interesting the whole thing about the acceleration of the process, because when Zelensky say, oh well, I want an accelerated procedure for Ukraine to join the EU, many interpret that as Ukraine should skip the stage and just join the EU. Here he's saying, well, it's one thing to give them the candidate status earlier than normally it should take, because indeed that usually takes years before you're even given the status of candidate country. But that doesn't mean that they get a pass. That doesn't mean that Ukraine should be exempted from the rules that are necessary for a country to join the EU. So in that sense, he was saying, well, it's about political message, but that Ukraine is not going to enter tomorrow. And in any case, there is a number of countries who don't particularly want to have new countries join the EU, because they consider that we are still recovering between as a figure of speech from the previous wave of enlargement. So the EU itself, and politically also at home, the population is not ready for new enlargement. Do you prefer if they limit how much military equipment we are going to buy from the USA and for building up our own infrastructure instead of going down? Instead, if we are going down the military route instead? Well, you are right to an extent. Why? And that's something we discussed a bit as well in the context of Germany, for instance. Is when you buy military equipment, so let's say from the US, in a lot of time, once you buy the equipment, that doesn't mean you can do whatever you want with it. There is a number of rules, because it's US-made equipment. The US still has a say on what you do with the thing. So you can't resell it. They will strip it of certain technology that they consider too sensitive to share with their allies, and that could risk ending up in wrong hands. They of course super control the supplying of spare parts. So let's say, for instance, a country completely outside the EU, Iran, prior to the Iran Revolution in 1979, was close to the West. It was equipped with US military equipment. Their planes were US made and all that. And after the revolution, of course, Iran became hostile to the US, and so what the US did is that they stopped providing equipment to the Iran military, which means that after a while, their let's say, for instance, their planes, their military planes, was completely paralyzed because they had planes, they had US-made planes, but they didn't have the spare parts. So after some time, well, they were completely incapable of flying because they could not get the spare parts from the US. So there is indeed a risk, on pure military terms, when you buy foreign equipment, including from the US, but the same is applicable to EU countries. Germany has similar laws for German-made equipment. That's how they prevented for so long. For instance, I think it's Estonia from sending military equipment to Ukraine because it was equipment that was German-made, and so they were saying, well, no, we forbid you from sending this German-made equipment to Ukraine, despite the fact that Estonia had legitimately bought the equipment, so it was theirs. But yeah, there is indeed a question of independence when you buy outside. That being said, there is then the question of, okay, you need also some time to have good equipment, and some good equipment is built outside the EU. And in any case, you have the NATO technical standards. That means that there must be compatibility between the different weapon systems within the alliance. So that's basically, if there is a need, you can easily switch over or replace equipment from one country to another because they're all part of the same military alliance. Anyway, moving on from that, so he developed all the sanctions against Russia. I'm not going to go back on that. He said that Putin actually united Europe, which is a very common position on the matter. And generally speaking, they said that Putin united the West and completely failed on his bet to his initial assessment, probably, I'm not in his head, but was that he could invade Ukraine, and that the West would stay divided, the EU would not do anything, and so by the time he would have taken Kiev, well, the EU and the US would have remained divided. They could not have done anything, and actually it was proven wrong because, on the contrary, the West got united. They even got over a number of difficulties they had between each other, including the US and the EU. They're trying to patch things up on other issue because of the Ukraine situation. Within the EU as well, it links back to the issue of the rule of law, for instance, where the Commission, which was pretty hesitant to use the rule of law mechanism, is now even less keen on using it because of the whole Ukraine situation. They don't want to, for instance, to hit on Poland, given that Poland is hosting a lot of Ukrainian refugees. So there is there is as well an impact and a cost to this unity. But indeed, Putin did a lot to unite and push for some EU policies lately. Something that also he mentioned that is completely true. The EU is an economic superpower, but a geopolitical dwarf, which is completely true. And what the EU as a power is its economy, and it's, let's be clear, it's not a small tool. I think we discussed before the whole Brussels effect, so the regulatory influence that the EU has on the rest of the world because of the size of its market, and in terms of pure economy, nobody wants to mess with the biggest trading bloc of the world. And prior to Brexit, what was the biggest economic power in the world? Now I think that post-Brexit is second, closely behind the US, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, what else did we talk about? Length of EU legislation. So I say, yeah, if you could change something, it would make it quicker for the EU legislation to be adopted. So to give you an idea, for EU law to be passed, from the moment it is proposed officially, so ignoring the preparatory work from the Commission before, and in general you will count a year and a half in general. More year and a half, sometimes 2 years for a text to be so from between the moment where the Commission presents the text to the moment where it's adopted definitely by the Parliament and the Council for following trilogues. So indeed that's quite a long legislative life, and so he would like to make it shorter, to make the EU more agile and quicker on its feet to get things. And yeah, the final point, he didn't seem too keen on the federal Europe. So sorry, guys. He's not one of the federalists in the parliament, even if he supports on the other end the deepening of the EU. Which he says doesn't need the federal union to go forward, and he used rightly so the example of the pandemic with vaccines, now the example of defense, and etc. etc. Well, that's what I had on my little notebook. So if you have comments or questions, now is the time. Otherwise, I will conclude. So tell me everything you have. I'll give you just a moment. In the meantime, I'm going to have a drink. Up some well-earned water. So let me go back to the introductory part. So still no comments or question. All right, let's conclude this. So I hope that you enjoyed the interview. I thought it was interesting, especially since he was an EPP member. We don't have a lot of EPP in the interviews, unfortunately, so that was good and refreshing to have that. As always, if you enjoy what you saw, was in this interview, you wish there were more like him. Well, unfortunately, that's beyond my control. I have a few more EPPs in reserve, and some already booked for interviews. But yeah, unfortunately, as a trend, EPP and ECR members are not so keen to come on the channel for the time being. But I still have a few. But yeah, as always, if you liked what you saw, don't hesitate to follow the channel or my other social media. You have the link now in chat for the Twitter, the Discord, the YouTube, and all that. If you really enjoy what you saw, you can even toss a coin to your streamer via the Coffee link. By the way, small announcement, I will go back into the affiliate program, so subscription Twitch sub will be back soon. I will mention the whole reasoning maybe on Sunday during the news review. I will see, but yeah, the subs will be back at some point on the channel. I just need to write to Twitch to get that back online. And otherwise, as for the program of the rest of the week, I will see you on Sunday for the news review at 6 in French and at 8 in English. And on this note, I wish you all a good week, because it's only Tuesday. We've been going quite fast in terms of content this week, but I wish you all a good week, and I hope to see you all on Sunday. So have a good one, guys. Bye.